much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I got to do what I used to do when I'd be campaigning. When I'd get down and out, I'd say, well, where's the labor crowd? I'd go over to a labor hall, or I'd go up on the iron range, or I'd come over to the Trades and Labor Assembly, or I'd go over to the Central Labor Union. And I'd see my friends, and I'd get all pumped up again. And I'd be able to forget that something went wrong the day before. And that's the way we're going to do it today. The first thing I want to say to you as individuals and as a movement, if you're going to be something, if you're going to do something, you have to be proud of yourself. And you have to be proud of your heritage as a labor movement, just as you are proud of your family or of your religion or whatever else it may be. And I've always been associated with the labor movement. I told the President of the United States at a private luncheon that we had not long ago, I said, Mr. President, you just have to understand in our discussions, there's just a couple of things that I may be slightly prejudiced on, amongst others. But I said I never would have been in the United States Senate had it not have been for my friends in the labor movement. And please don't ever ask me to do anything that would in any way injure or cripple or weaken that movement. I said, other than that, you can ask for almost anything. But I have some loyalties and I have some priorities. And one of my loyalties has been to this great movement. And I'll tell you why. Not because you're perfect, not because there hasn't been a scoundrel now and then, because none of us are perfect. We've all made mistakes, and God only knows. Some of us have made too many. But we judge a movement like this by its overall record. And we judge the labor movement on what it has done to lift the standard of living for millions and millions and millions of plain American citizens who today can have their own home, who today have decent working conditions, who today can send their children to a good school. It never could have happened without you. Be proud of it, dear friends. Be proud of it. And just remember this. Mom said, yeah, they'll take your picture if you wipe your eyes with the Kleenex. Well, that's all right. Take it. Fellow that doesn't have any tears doesn't have any heart. The history of the labor movement needs to be taught in every school in this land. We need to know our roots. As they say, we learned about roots, didn't we, in 1976. We need to know who we are, what we are, where we come from, how we got here. You've heard me say this before. It is imperative. It is a part of American history. This great nation wasn't built just because somebody sat behind a table and finagled and even financed. Important as finance is, and it is important. Important as planning is, it is important. Important as design is, and it is important. Ultimately, it's the worker. It was the worker that built the railroads, that dug the tunnels, that dredged the rivers, that built the ports, that built the huge skyscrapers, put in the highways, and built the homes. America is a living testimonial to what free men and women organized in free democratic trade unions can do to make a better life. And we ought to be proud of it. Just remember that. The first thing that any authoritarian or any two-bit dictator does is to abolish free labor. That's the first thing. Long before they get to expropriation of land, long before they get to even putting into jail the so-called political prisoners, they abolish a free labor movement. And in America, thank God, instead of abolishing our labor movement, we're going to strengthen it. And workers today that are not organized, many of them particularly in the Deep South, workers today that do not have the working conditions that they ought to have, are going to have a better chance. Nobody's going to give it to them on a platter. It's not going to be easy. But they're not going to have everything set against them. They're going to have a chance once we get this labor reform bill passed, so that when they have a vote in their plant, and the vote is taken, and if the union wins, the union is recognized, and there's none of this nonsense of delay and litigation and obstruction, such as has prevented the labor movement of the United States from its legitimate growth. Oh, what have you done with free organized labor? Collective bargaining, better wages. Now every time anybody gets a little better wages, somebody says, inflation. Right away. The banker raises the interest rates, they say sound monetary policy. You know that. Thank God for collective bargaining. What it's meant to the income of our families. What it's meant for working conditions. What it's meant for grievance procedures. What it's meant for job security. What it's meant for recreation and vacation so that families can get together and travel across this country. What it's meant for pensions and what it's meant for health. Millions of Americans today have health care not because the government has passed it, because we haven't had the guts to do it, but because negotiators have sat down at the table with their employers and have worked out a health and welfare pension program commonly called fringe benefits, which makes it possible for you as a union member to have good health care with the best of doctors in the best of hospitals and not have to go broke during the whole process. Isn't that a marvelous thing? Now, who does that hurt? See, we need to tell people about this. The doctors get their money, the hospitals get their money, the family still survives, the community is better off. What's all this nonsense about that when you give a little wage increase for a worker, and of course, by the way, you generally negotiate, 3-year contracts, and when they put it in the paper, they put the whole 3-year contract in as if it was all the first year. I tell you, dear friends, a 3-year contract is the first year to catch up for what you just lost. The second year is to try to get a little bit ahead, and the third year is to try to maintain even. So you're really battling hard. But the American worker, and let's get this down straight now, the American worker is the most productive worker in the world. The most productive worker in the world. I can hear somebody say, yeah, you can expect that from Humphrey. Don't expect it from me. That's the official record. We have the best labor relations in the world. Fewer work stoppages than any other industrialized country. Not bad. We have a responsible labor movement. And one of the things that's got to be done is for the government of the United States, by official declared policy, to state that the goal and the objective of all the policies of the government of the United States is full employment and economic growth. And that is what the Humphrey Hawkins bill is all about. To see to it the Humphrey Hawkins bill, and I want you to get the literature about it. I don't want you to be deceived by these letters to the editors. I don't want you to be fooled by these ill-informed editorials that appear from time to time. The whole purpose of the Humphrey Hawkins bill is to utilize the resources of the government in coordination with private enterprise, to maximize private enterprise, to see that private enterprise has the credit, the money, the resources, the trained workers that are necessary to keep this economy of ours growing, so that as the labor force grows, we can absorb the new ones, and that we can pick up the millions that have been left behind. The second part of the Humphrey Hawkins bill is merely what we're doing today, but not enough. Emergency public works, the Comprehensive Educational Training Program, known as CETA, the special aid to our cities, the Job Corps, the Youth Employment Program, of which I was a co-author, as was Wendy. But we need to do more of it. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest enemy America has today is the fact that there are 7 million people capable of working, that ought to be working, that are unemployed, and of those 7 million, 3 million are youth between the ages of 16 and 22. And many of them have never had a job. Many of them have never known work discipline. Many of them know nothing of the therapy that comes from work, and they've learned how to live off the street. And I'm here to tell you that as long as you have that many people unemployed, you'll never cut the crime rate. You'll never get at dope addiction. You'll never solve the social and economic problems which you read about, which plague our cities and move into our countryside. Solving the problems of unemployment is not only an economic necessity, it is a social necessity. We need to wage war upon unemployment. We need to have the same commitment to it. But we move on it, even now, even though we're doing 5 times better than we did. We move slowly. Take a look at how long it has taken us to even set up a Job Corps center. So many people have got to pick at it, and we have to go through so many different little rules and regulations. Let me tell you, Franklin Roosevelt set up the Civilian Conservation Corps back in the 30s. You remember, some of you, the old CCC camps. He put one man in charge. He called him in March, and he said to this gentleman, by the end of June, I want 500,000 young men in camps, out in the forest, at work, clothed, with the tools, and ready to go to work, from March until June. And by June 30th, 530,000 young men were at work, in the camps, out in the forest, doing the job. It can be done. You just got to make up your mind to do it. Did you know that Roosevelt never had a welfare program? No, the welfare was taken care of by local county people. He had a work program. If you didn't have a job, there was a job offered. Work. We've got things to do in this country. And we've gone along here, piddling along, and we've been spending billions and billions and billions. We've never made up our mind that America needed something. Forests to be replanted, cities to be rebuilt, railroads, my goodness, railroads that need modernization and rebuilding. Hundreds and thousands, over 30,000 bridges in America that are out of date, that slow up our transportation system. Ports that are too old and too small to take care of modern shipping. The list is unlimited. We're 15 years behind in reforestation. It isn't only the elm disease. And by the way, we ought to have an urban forestation program too. Plant trees in our cities, just as we do in our countryside. We've got things to do in this country. And I want the labor movement to start demanding that they be done. That's the way we get things done. You see, we got to look ahead. Grandpa Humphrey has no right to just use up the inheritance that came to me and leave nothing for my grandchildren. And we have been doing that. We've been using up our land. We've been using up our water. We've been using up our oil. We've been fouling up our air. And now we're asking ourselves, can we afford to do anything about it? Let me ask you something. If the Soviet Union were to attack us or some other country, and we knew that they were going to conquer large areas, do you think we'd stand back and say, do you think we can afford to defend ourselves? You know what would happen. This country would rally, pray God, soon enough, and we'd wage a battle to the very last person if need be. We wouldn't ask whether we could afford it. Did you ever hear anybody say during World War II, do you think we can afford to fight Hitler? And by the way, we financed World War II with scarcity of money, scarcity of commodities, scarcity of supply with 2% interest. 2% money, 2% money. Because we had a president then, we had an economic philosophy that said it could be done. And all of this requires work, and we're not going to go broke doing it. No nation ever went bankrupt building. You go bankrupt in wars. No nation ever lost its life trying to save life. You lose your life when you take life. And I ask the labor movement to really once again become the idealistic, conscience of American politics. Too many people in politics today are afraid. They're afraid. They say, oh, they won't go for this. Well, I knew they wouldn't go for civil rights in 1948. I knew they wouldn't go for Medicare in 1949. I knew that they wouldn't go for the Peace Corps in 1958. And I knew they wouldn't go, if you please, for the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency in 1959. But ultimately they did. If you're going to be a man in politics, you have to be like a soldier on the battlefield. You know there are risks. There's no guarantee of your life. But as somebody once said, I'd rather live 50 years like a tiger than 100 years like a chicken. Thank you very much.